You may not say it out loud, but you feel it growing inside you. You don't want to leave. Not because you haven't hurt enough, but because you once believed that love could fix everything. You once hoped, forgave, and told yourself, just hold on a little longer. And you did, more than anyone knows. But the heartbreaking thing is, the longer you stay, the more you feel yourself fading. You love her, no doubt about that, but you're also struggling to hold on to what's left of yourself. The times you stayed quiet weren't because you agreed. It's because you were too tired to explain. The times you took the blame weren't because you were wrong. It's because you didn't want the tension anymore. The times you texted first weren't because you had nothing better to do. It's because if you didn't, both of you would slip into silence like strangers. You loved hard. You sacrificed a lot. But you still feel lonely in the very relationship you once called home. And maybe you've started to realize what you've been trying so hard to avoid. Loving someone doesn't mean you're being loved in return. Not everyone is capable of loving you the way you need to be loved. And sometimes, one-sided love is the quickest way to lose yourself. Love is not enough when it becomes a one-man job. So if you're thinking about walking away, it doesn't mean you're giving up on love. It simply means you're no longer willing to lose yourself one more time. You did everything within your power. You read books, listened to podcasts, watched videos about effective communication, about how to maintain a lasting relationship. You learned about love languages, practiced emotional regulation, listened without judgment. You thought if you were patient enough, kind enough, good enough, then things would work out. That if you changed the way you spoke, if you were softer, more understanding, she would finally see and respond. You were the one to make peace after every argument. You were the one who texted first, checked in first, spoke first. Not because you were wrong, but because you didn't want distance to become a habit. You took the blame, even when it still hurt inside. You made an effort not because you were bored or needed validation, but because you truly wanted to keep that person in your life. You thought, if you just tried a little harder, things would be different. But day by day, you started to feel like you were trying alone. Messages read but left unanswered. Kind words met with silence. All your efforts to bring the two of you closer only made you feel like you were walking a lonely road, trying to hold on to them while also trying not to fall apart yourself. Real love isn't one person carrying it all. It's not one person always reaching while the other remains still. It's not you being the only one to adjust, while the other won't even take one step toward you. You don't need someone perfect. You don't need someone just like you. But you do need someone who walks with you, not someone you have to love and pull and push and hold on to all at once. You tried so hard, but love isn't meant to be a full-time job for one person, because if it only moves when you're the one pushing the wheel, then it's not a shared journey. It's a solo one, carrying the hope of two people with the strength of only one. And maybe it's time you asked yourself, if you're always the one reaching out, texting first, making peace first, loving more, trying harder, then maybe you're the only one still in this relationship. If you're always the one reaching out, maybe you're the only one still in it. There are signs no one says out loud, but you feel them deeply. Conversations get shorter. The caring questions disappear. The attentive gaze is gone. What's left are dry responses, just enough to fulfill a role, to do what's expected but lacking any real presence. Every word you send feels like throwing a stone into a dry well. No echo, no response, no feeling of being reached back. The hugs, the touches, once made you feel close, now feel like obligations. A handhold has become a formality. A kiss feels programmed at the right time, in the right place, but stripped of emotion. And then, both start choosing silence. But it's not the comfortable kind. Not the kind where two people understand each other so well that words aren't needed. It's a suffocating silence, a kind of distance that no one names. An invisible wall growing between two people who used to be everything to each other. The moment you start feeling alone, while still in a relationship, that's the beginning of the end. When you sit next to them but feel lonelier than when you're alone. When you talk about a terrible day and they just nod absent-mindedly. When you try to open up, but they just want the conversation to end quickly. That's no longer a relationship, it's a quiet coexistence between two people who stopped trying to understand each other long ago. And then, you begin to retreat. Not loudly, not angrily. You simply and quietly start taking back what used to be yours. The loving words you were going to say, you keep them. The questions you were about to send, you delete them. Not because you're cold, but because you're too tired of holding on to something the other person no longer wants to hold with you. You don't want to become the one who begs. You don't want to keep being the only one who sees the relationship fading. And sometimes, the only way to protect the dignity you have left is to walk away in silence. Love, no matter how deep, is not always a good enough reason to stay. Just because you love deeply doesn't always mean you should keep going. Just because feelings remain doesn't mean you have to hold on. There are people you love with all your heart, yet still have to learn to let go, not because you stopped loving them, but because you're starting to realize that love is hurting you more than it's healing you. You can love someone deeply and still decide they're not healthy for your soul. You can forgive, and you have forgiven, more than once. You overlooked the careless words, the indifference, the long silences that made you question yourself. You told yourself, everyone has wounds, everyone needs time. But then you came to understand something. You can forgive them, but you cannot heal for them. And the longer you stay, the more you feel like you're carrying the pain of both people. A relationship where you have to love, to heal, and to carry emotions that aren't even yours. You can hold someone's hand tightly, but if they don't want to walk with you, you can't keep dragging them forever. You can't walk for them through fears, through wounds they refuse to face. Love cannot be a journey where one walks while the other stands still. You can't be the only one fighting for both. And then, you must face the hardest truth. Not all love should be continued. Not because you didn't try, but because you tried too much, and alone. At some point, love stops being a connection and starts becoming depletion. Sometimes, walking away is not weakness, it's wisdom. You don't walk away because you're weak. You walk because you're clear-headed enough to realize, if you stay, the person you'll lose isn't just them, it's yourself, and you've already lost yourself once. There won't be a second time. There's a very clear sign that it's time to leave. It's when you no longer recognize yourself in the relationship. You're no longer natural, no longer the truest version of yourself. Every word you say has to be measured. Every emotion you show has to be restrained. Every action you take has to be adjusted to avoid bothering them, to avoid conflict, to avoid making them uncomfortable. You don't dare to be sad, don't dare to be angry, don't dare to be honest about how you truly feel inside. You're afraid that if you express anything they don't approve of, they'll withdraw, go silent, or blame you for overreacting. And so, you learn to shrink, to hold back, to soften, to stay silent, until one day you don't even dare to breathe in your own rhythm when they're around. You walk through your own life like you're walking a tightrope, trying to keep your balance, trying not to make a mistake, because you're afraid that if you slip even a little, everything will fall apart. But real love doesn't ask you to live in fear every day. Love isn't supposed to make you question your own worth. It's not supposed to make you feel like you're not enough, not the right way, not worth holding on to. If being loved means being less of yourself, it's not love. When you start losing yourself just to keep a relationship, then no matter how much you love, it's time to take a step back. The right relationship doesn't make you shrink to fit someone else. It creates space for both people to be themselves, to grow, to breathe deeply, to evolve together. If you're feeling suffocated in the very love you're in, if you have to ask for permission just to be yourself, if you have to hide what's true in your heart just to keep the peace, then it's no longer love. It's an existence in a role you no longer have the strength to play. You don't leave because you stopped loving them. You leave because you finally started loving you. And that's not selfish. That's awakening. That's when you choose yourself, not instead of them, but after all the times you didn't. Now is the time to return to yourself and walk away in silence, but full of self-respect. You don't need to scream that you've had enough. Don't need to cry, argue, or slam the final door shut. Don't need to leave a bitter word or a dramatic ending. You can walk away, quietly. A quietness not of someone who gave up, but of someone awake enough to know it's time to stop. Leaving quietly is the loudest form of self-respect. When you leave, you're not hoping they'll realize how much you mattered, not hoping they'll regret, come back, apologize, or change. You're not leaving to be missed, not to prove anything. You're leaving because you've seen it all. So clearly that there's nothing left to say, nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to wait for. You once compromised, once tried to understand, once forgave, once gave more than you had. But in the end, you received only one thing: emptiness in the very place that used to be your anchor. So this time, you choose to walk away. Not to begin a new and promising chapter, but simply to preserve whatever is left of yourself. Maybe it's your self-respect, maybe your peace, maybe the voice inside you that's been silenced for too long. Whatever it is, you know you can't keep trading it away. You're not leaving because you don't love them. You're leaving because, finally, after everything, you've started to learn how to love yourself. And sometimes, the first love you should choose isn't another person. It's you. You still love her. But now, you love your peace more. And that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a coward. Doesn't make your love any less real. It only proves that you've grown past the fear of being alone. You've lived enough to understand loving someone should never come at the cost of losing yourself. Your leaving is not the end of love. It's a conscious pause when you realize love, if it's no longer a place where you can be yourself, no matter how beautiful, is no longer enough to stay. You didn't leave because you stopped loving. You left because you finally learned to love yourself just a little more. If this story touched something in you, leave a quiet note in the comments. I left, but I never stopped loving. Because sometimes the smallest share is the strongest way to say, I stayed true to my heart.